When the Spokane River drifts silent beneath the morning fog, secrets sometimes surface that can change a life forever. On a lonely summer dawn, an old man pulls a battered crate from the water. Inside, a half-drowned shepherd puppy clings to hope by a thread. Across town, a little girl sits by her window, clutching a faded teddy bear, both waiting for the world to notice them. But what if the river, the child, and the dog are all searching for the same thing, a second chance? Before you turn away, let me tell you what happened when fate bound three broken hearts together, and a silent pup showed an entire city that courage sometimes begins with a single, quiet act. If stories of hope and healing move you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. You never know who might need a second chance today. Early morning mist hung low over the Spokane River, veiling the city in a pale, shifting veil. The water flowed slow and glassy, catching bits of summer sunlight as it filtered through the clouds. On the eastern edge of Spokane, Washington, old brick buildings lined the riverbank, their windows glinting, faded by years and rain. It was late June, the air fresh with the promise of heat yet to come, but still carrying the chill of the night. Birds cried from their hidden perches, and the city, just waking, stretched out its arms with a sleepy yawn. Sam Whitaker dipped his paddle into the river, the motion practiced, calm. He was a man who wore his years with an easy grace, broad-shouldered but stooped, hair silver and neatly trimmed, blue eyes sharp and clear behind thick-framed glasses. 65 years old, Sam's face was lined, a testament to decades spent fighting fires and saving lives, his hands strong but rough, as if they remembered every rung of every ladder he'd ever climbed. Since retiring, he'd found solace on the river, volunteering for cleanup days with the local paddlers club. The river was quiet company, and after losing his wife, Ellen, to cancer 3 years ago, Sam had grown to treasure these silent dawns and the honest work of hauling out garbage from the city's lifeblood. This morning, the group was small, only 3 boats, Sam in his battered green kayak, Frank Ramirez, a wiry, cheerful mechanic in his 50s, quick to laugh and quicker to lend a hand, in his red canoe, and high schooler Ashley Grant, her black braid poking from beneath a faded baseball cap, paddling determinedly in a rented blue kayak. Ashley, 16, was polite but reserved, volunteering for extra credit after a rough semester marked by a broken leg that kept her off the soccer field and left her struggling to catch up. Frank called out to her often, telling jokes or pointing out bits of wildlife, but Ashley mostly nodded, keeping her eyes on the water and her mind, it seemed, on distant things. Sam let himself drift, the current lazy, his paddle resting on his knees. His thoughts wandered, as they often did, to Ellen, her warm smile, her laugh in the kitchen, the way she'd always reminded him to see the beauty in small things. He was startled back to the present by a dull thump against the side of his kayak, a hollow sound muffled by the river and the mist. He looked down. There, caught in a slow eddy, was a dirty white plastic crate, half submerged, spinning gently in the current. He reached over, nudged the crate with his paddle, and at first, he thought it must be empty, another piece of careless trash to haul away. But then he saw movement, a shudder, barely perceptible, a trembling shape huddled in the shadows inside. "Frank!" Sam called, his voice cutting through the hush. "There's something in here." Frank's canoe angled toward him, while Ashley paused, the tip of her paddle stilled mid-stroke. Sam maneuvered the crate alongside his kayak, his heart beating a little faster now, and leaned over. Through the grime and moss clinging to the crate's slats, he saw the shape, a puppy, barely more than a shadow, limbs folded tight to his body, soaked through, matted fur streaked with river silt. The dog's coat, short, classic sable and tan, with black dusting its ears and snout, was plastered to his bones. The animal didn't make a sound, didn't even seem to breathe, save for a faint, shivering rise and fall at its ribs. One eye, wide and glassy, flickered open, then slid shut as if the effort was too much. Frank, having drawn up beside Sam, peered in and let out a low whistle. "He's just a baby. How the hell did he end up out here?" Sam didn't answer. His mind raced with anger, confusion, but mostly with a surge of protectiveness he hadn't felt since his own children were small. He unlatched the crate, hands shaking. The stench hit him, a mix of river mud, fear, and something sharp and metallic, the scent of old wounds. Very gently, Sam slid his arms under the dog, surprised at how little weight he felt, nothing but fur and bone. The puppy didn't resist, didn't whine or yelp, only sagged into Sam's chest like something left behind by hope itself. Sam wrapped his flannel overshirt around the dog, tucking the thin body close for warmth. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "You're safe now." Ashley, watching silently, bit her lip and handed Sam a faded beach towel from her dry bag. Her eyes, brown, wary, flecked with sadness, lingered on the puppy's limp form. "Will he make it?" she asked, her voice barely above the river's whisper. Sam didn't know. But he nodded. "We'll get him help." Frank guided Sam back to shore, where Sam hurried to his old white pickup parked beneath a cottonwood tree. Sam worked with the practiced speed of someone used to emergencies. He settled the puppy on the front seat, the towel tucked around him, and called the only vet he trusted in Spokane, Dr. Maggie Tran. Dr. Tran, Vietnamese-American, late 30s, was petite but radiated authority and calm. Her dark hair always pinned up, her hands sure and gentle. She'd come to Spokane a decade earlier, building a reputation for taking on the toughest rescue cases, stray cats with broken legs, dogs pulled from fires, the occasional raccoon stuck in a storm drain. She didn't ask many questions over the phone, only told Sam to drive straight to her clinic and that she'd be ready when he arrived. The drive was short but felt endless. Sam kept glancing at the puppy, at the way its chest moved with an agonizing slowness, eyes half-shuttered. He thought about Ellen again, how she'd have insisted on stopping for ice cream on the way home, even on a rescue run. A lump formed in his throat as the memories came and went. When he pulled up at the brightly painted clinic, Dr. Tran and her assistant, a college student named Toby, met him at the curb. Maggie took one look at the puppy and barked orders, "Let's move." Sam, hold his head steady. Toby, get a heating pad. Inside, the clinic was clean and smelled of antiseptic and dog treats. Maggie's examination was thorough but gentle. Male, maybe 5 months, underweight, signs of old bruises, some scratches, possible mild hypothermia, she recited. She checked the puppy's gums, shook her head. "He's had a rough time. But I've seen worse bounce back." Sam hovered anxiously, hands tucked under his arms, unsure what to do with himself. Frank and Ashley waited in the lobby, Frank with his battered mariner's cap in his hands, Ashley silent, eyes flickering between her phone and the door to the back room. As Maggie worked, she talked softly, both to the dog and to herself, murmuring encouragement. The puppy's breathing slowed, steadied just a little, but he still didn't make a sound, his head nestled against the heating pad. Maggie looked up at Sam. "Does he have a name?" Sam hesitated. "Not yet. But he made it through the river. He deserves a good one." Maggie smiled faintly. "Give it time. He'll let you know what suits him." By late morning, the sun broke through the clouds, turning the clinic's windows to gold. The puppy slept, cocooned in blankets and soft light. Maggie promised to keep him overnight, updating Sam by phone if anything changed. Sam reluctantly agreed, leaving his number, glancing back at the puppy's still form as he left the exam room. Outside, the day had brightened, the river flowing on, but Sam's heart was heavy with a strange, restless hope. In a quiet house across the city, a little girl with sad eyes pressed her forehead to her bedroom window, watching other children play, hugging a ragged old teddy bear to her chest. She did not know it yet, but her world, and the world of a battered puppy, had already begun to change. Morning broke fully over Spokane, brushing the river and the city's rooftops with a haze of soft gold. The hum of traffic gradually filled the air, and the day's heat hinted at its arrival as sunlight streamed through the front windows of the Greenleaf Animal Clinic. Inside, the lights were already on. Dr. Maggie Tran stood in her small office, reading over notes from the night before, her brows drawn together in focus. Petite, with the quiet grace of a dancer, Maggie had a way of moving through the world as if she was always on her way to help someone. Her parents had been doctors, too, refugees from Vietnam who had settled in Washington and raised their daughter with an unwavering belief in kindness and diligence. Maggie's eyes, dark and bright, seemed to soften every time she looked at a wounded animal. She set down her pen and checked the clock. It was just after 7. In the kennel room, the German Shepherd puppy lay on a bed of fleece blankets, curled tightly against the cold. His breathing was shallow but steady, ears twitching at every sound. Maggie watched him through the glass for a moment, then opened the door and knelt. "Good morning, little one," she said softly, reaching to stroke his head. He flinched at her touch but did not withdraw. She checked his steady drip, clear fluids, and made notes on his chart. "Still no name, huh?" she murmured, a smile tugging at her lips. She watched for any sign of improvement, a tail wag, a curious glance. But the puppy only closed his eyes and pressed himself further into the blanket. Toby, her assistant, entered quietly. A tall, slim young man with sandy hair and a shy smile, Toby was studying animal science at the local community college. He admired Maggie's skill and worked hard to learn from her, though he sometimes tripped over his own feet in the tight hallways. "Sam's here," he said quietly, "with coffee." Maggie nodded, her gaze never leaving the puppy. "Tell him he can come in." Moments later, Sam Whitaker stepped into the room, looking tired but hopeful. He wore the same flannel shirt as yesterday, washed and neatly pressed, the lines on his face a little deeper this morning. He carried 2 steaming cups, handing one to Maggie with a grateful nod. Sam leaned over the kennel, his large hands gentle as he reached to touch the puppy's back. "Morning, partner," he whispered. "Still hanging in there?" His voice was soft, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace of the room. Maggie watched the way Sam moved, careful and patient. She knew loss when she saw it. Sam wore his loneliness like an old jacket, always present, never entirely shrugged off. She wondered if this broken puppy, for all his pain, might be a small antidote to the ache in Sam's chest. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the Monroe apartment was beginning to stir. Grace Monroe was up before her daughter, hair pulled into a messy bun, her nurse's scrubs freshly laundered but faded with years of work. Grace was tall, willowy, with tired green eyes and a gentle smile that rarely reached her lips these days. The loss of her husband had left a permanent shadow in her posture. She moved carefully through the morning routines, her gestures brisk but affectionate. She prepared Lila's breakfast, peanut butter toast and strawberries, and set out a glass of orange juice, pausing to glance at the clock before heading to her daughter's small bedroom. Lila Monroe, 7 years old, sat on the floor in pajamas, lining up her stuffed animals in precise rows. She had a halo of brown curls, an upturned nose, and the wide, searching eyes of someone who saw more than she ever said aloud. Since moving to Spokane, Lila had retreated further into her shell, her voice a whisper, her laughter all but gone. Her only confidant was Mr. Buttons, a ragged teddy bear with a missing ear and a faded blue bow. Grace watched her daughter, heart aching, then knelt to brush a strand of hair from Lila's forehead. "Eat your breakfast, honey," she said softly. "I've got to work early today. You'll stay with Mrs. Parker until I'm back." Lila nodded, her gaze never leaving her bear. Mrs. Parker, their next-door neighbor, was a retired school librarian in her 70s, short and stout, with a mass of white hair always pulled back in a bun. She had a ready laugh and a fondness for crossword puzzles, and though she sometimes forgot names or misplaced her glasses, she never failed to make Lila feel welcome. That morning, as Grace dropped off her daughter, Mrs. Parker bustled about making oatmeal and humming a tune. Lila watched quietly as the old woman moved, feeling a little less invisible. Mid-morning, at the clinic, the puppy's condition had stabilized. Maggie and Toby worked together, monitoring fluids and trying to tempt the pup with small bits of chicken and rice, but he refused to eat. Maggie sat with him for long stretches, reading her emails aloud or humming softly. Once, she caught Sam standing in the hallway, watching through the glass with a look of deep concern. He's strong, Maggie reassured him. Sometimes it just takes time. Sam sat in the waiting room, fidgeting with his phone, when Ashley Grant arrived. Ashley, in her signature ball cap and faded jeans, entered quietly, a paperback book tucked under her arm. She asked after the puppy, her tone casual but her eyes betraying real worry. Sam told her the puppy was still weak but alive. Ashley listened and nodded, offering to run errands or help at the clinic, a rare show of interest from the normally distant teenager. Maggie, noticing Ashley's interest, gave her the job of folding towels in the back room, a simple task but one that let her be near the animals. Across town, Lila spent her morning with Mrs. Parker, coloring pictures and listening to stories. Mrs. Parker shared tales of her own childhood dog and told Lila about the rescue group that had pulled a puppy from the river the day before. The idea of a river rescue sparked something in Lila's imagination, a glimmer of hope or curiosity she hadn't felt since moving to Spokane. She wondered what the puppy looked like, if he was lonely, if he needed a friend. Later that afternoon, after her shift at the hospital, Grace picked Lila up and listened quietly as her daughter asked timid questions about the puppy in the story. Grace promised to call the animal clinic and find out if the dog was all right. She left a voicemail for Dr. Tran, explaining that her daughter was struggling to adjust, and asking, almost on a whim, if Lila might be allowed to visit the puppy. Maggie, exhausted but touched by the request, called back after hours. She explained the puppy was still very weak, but a short visit in a few days might do both Lila and the dog some good. Back at the clinic, night fell as Sam sat one last time by the puppy's side, talking softly about rivers and second chances. "You're not alone now, fella," he promised, his voice rough with hope. In the quiet apartment across town, Lila lay awake in bed, hugging Mr. Buttons, dreaming of a puppy with sad eyes and a hero's heart, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she could help save him too. Rain fell gently over Spokane the next morning, dappling the clinic's windows and turning the city's green spaces to a bright, washed emerald. The sound was a comfort inside the Greenleaf Animal Clinic, where life carried on in steady, hopeful rhythms. Dr. Maggie Tran arrived early, umbrella dripping, her steps quiet as always. She stopped first at Cooper's kennel, kneeling down and smiling at the way his ears flickered toward her. Cooper, still unnamed to the world but not to Sam, lay with his nose tucked beneath his tail, his coat dry at last, though still dull and patchy from too many hard days. The puppy's eyes, deep brown with a dark rim around each iris, watched Maggie with wariness, but for the first time, they did not immediately look away. Toby, the tall, sandy-haired assistant, brought a small bowl of boiled chicken and rice, placing it just inside Cooper's reach. "You think he'll eat today?" he asked quietly, crouching next to Maggie. She shrugged, hopeful. "We'll see. Sometimes trust starts with a single bite." Sam arrived not long after, a rain-spattered windbreaker over his ever-present flannel. His face was tired, but his hands were steady, bringing in a well-worn paperback novel that he'd once read aloud to his own children, decades ago. "Morning, you two," he greeted Maggie and Toby, before settling onto a chair beside the kennel. He started reading in a soft baritone, his voice weaving through the room with the ease of old routine. Maggie watched, quietly impressed. She had learned that healing sometimes meant simply sharing space with pain, not filling it with noise or distraction. As Sam read, Cooper's nose twitched. He did not move, but he listened, the cadence of Sam's words different from the clinical voices of doctors and techs. For the first time since arriving at the clinic, Cooper stretched out a single paw, inching it toward the wire door, then withdrew it, uncertain but curious. Maggie caught the gesture and smiled. "He's coming around," she whispered to Toby. By late morning, Cooper surprised everyone by sniffing the food, then taking a tentative mouthful. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Maggie called it a victory, Sam agreed, beaming as if the puppy had recited poetry. Across town, Lila Monroe spent her day in school, her desk tucked in the back row of Mrs. Jennings' second-grade classroom. Mrs. Jennings was a round, cheerful woman in her 50s, with graying blonde hair cut short and glasses perched on her nose. She decorated her classroom with paper flowers and always kept a bowl of butterscotch candies on her desk for students who needed encouragement. She noticed Lila's shyness, the way she kept her head bowed and her hands fidgeting with the strap of her old canvas backpack. Mrs. Jennings, gentle but persistent, made a point of greeting Lila each morning with a smile, asking about her drawings or the stories she read at home. At recess, Lila stayed close to the fence, watching other children chase each other across the playground. Some of the girls giggled together near the swings, while the boys played soccer in the muddy field. Lila, her brown curls damp from the misty air, didn't join in. Instead, she pulled Mr. Buttons, her teddy bear, from her bag, giving him a secret squeeze before tucking him away again. A boy named Tyler, a sturdy, red-haired kid with grass stains on his jeans, ran up to her once, inviting her to play tag, but she shook her head, voice barely a whisper. Tyler shrugged, unbothered, and darted back to his friends. After school, Grace picked up Lila, umbrella in hand, her scrubs neat but her eyes rimmed with fatigue. The walk home was quiet, rain pattering against the pavement. Grace gently asked if Lila had made any new friends. Lila shook her head but asked instead if they could visit the animal clinic. Grace, heart aching, promised that maybe by the weekend they could go, if the puppy was strong enough. He's got to get better, right? Lila asked, her voice hopeful for the first time in weeks. Yes, Grace said, squeezing her daughter's hand. He's got a whole team looking out for him. Back at the clinic, Maggie received Grace's voicemail and called her during a lunch break, explaining Cooper's progress and saying she thought a visit in a few days might indeed help both the puppy and Lila. Maggie's voice was kind, and she asked a few gentle questions about Lila, sensing the worry behind Grace's careful words. They agreed to schedule a short, quiet visit for the weekend, nothing overwhelming, just a chance for a little girl and a lonely dog to meet. Later that evening, as twilight settled in and the clinic emptied of most staff, Sam stayed by Cooper's side. He read a few more chapters of his book, pausing now and then to talk softly to the puppy about his own childhood, his first dog, Max, and the day he met Ellen. There was comfort in the telling, and something in Sam's manner, a patience forged in years of service and loss, seemed to reassure Cooper. Maggie watched from the doorway. "You're a good man, Sam," she said, not just out of habit but from conviction. Sam smiled, embarrassed, brushing his hand over his beard. "He's a good dog. Just needs a reason to trust again." Before closing up, Maggie returned with a gentle brush and began to work through Cooper's matted fur, whispering nonsense words and humming. Cooper tensed at first but gradually relaxed under her touch. For a moment, his eyes closed, and he let out a quiet, contented sigh. Maggie took this as another sign, a glimmer of hope. Night settled over Spokane, the rain easing to a hush. In her small apartment, Lila brushed her teeth and climbed into bed, Mr. Buttons tucked beside her. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, stroking her daughter's hair. "He's getting better," Grace promised. Lila nodded, eyes heavy with sleep. "I want him to have a family," she whispered, half dreaming. "Like us." Grace smiled through tears, kissing Lila's forehead. "Maybe he will, honey. Maybe we all will." And in the quiet clinic across town, Cooper slept more soundly than he had in days, his dreams touched for the first time by gentle hands and hopeful voices. Saturday arrived clear and brisk, with a rare sweep of blue sky over Spokane. Patches of sunlight warmed the sidewalks as the city shook off days of rain. The Greenleaf Animal Clinic was quieter than usual, weekend hours drawing fewer clients and only the soft, persistent clack of computer keys from the front desk. Maggie Tran unlocked the door just before 10, her hair down for once, loose around her face, giving her a younger, softer look. She moved with her usual quiet confidence, making rounds to check on her patients before setting up a space in the back room, a few chairs, a box of tissues, and Cooper's favorite fleece blanket. She wanted everything calm and safe for the special visit to come. In the apartment across town, Grace Monroe carefully helped Lila into her best blue sweater, the one with cloud buttons, and brushed her daughter's unruly brown curls until they shone. Grace herself wore a light green cardigan, her figure slender and posture straight despite the lines of fatigue beneath her eyes. She glanced in the mirror, adjusting her necklace, a simple silver locket that once belonged to her mother, worn for comfort more than style. Grace was anxious but determined to make this day matter, sensing its importance not just for Lila, but perhaps for herself as well. Lila was nearly silent on the drive, Mr. Buttons tucked tightly under her arm. She stared out the window at the city passing by, her legs swinging above the floor mat. At the clinic's door, Lila hesitated, small fingers clinging to her mother's sleeve until Maggie greeted them with a warm smile and invited them inside. "No rush," Maggie said gently, crouching to Lila's level. "He's waiting, but only if you're ready." Lila nodded, her lips pressed tight, summoning courage. Maggie led them to the back room, where Cooper lay curled on his blanket. The puppy's fur was cleaner now, the patches of missing hair less visible, his eyes brighter if still cautious. His ears pricked as they entered, and his nose twitched, drawing in the new scents, shampoo, soft perfume, the faint trace of strawberries from Lila's breakfast. Lila hesitated, hovering just beyond the threshold, then slowly sat cross-legged a few feet away, Mr. Buttons in her lap. She was smaller in person than Maggie had expected, delicate, with large, expressive eyes and a nervous energy that made her seem both much younger and much older than 7. Sam arrived a few minutes later, carrying a paper cup of hot chocolate he'd picked up for Lila. He greeted Grace with quiet courtesy, noting the tense set of her shoulders, then smiled at Maggie and knelt to scratch Cooper's ears. "Looks like we're all here," Sam said softly. Grace sat on a chair beside her daughter, hands folded in her lap. She was the type who noticed everything but rarely commented, her gaze moved from the puppy to the girl, to the careful setup of the room, absorbing details the way nurses always do. She and Sam exchanged a few words about the weather, about how quickly the river rose and fell with the season, each searching for a foothold in small talk. Lila, emboldened by the adults' quiet, placed Mr. Buttons just at the edge of Cooper's blanket and waited. Cooper sniffed the bear, paused, then rested his chin on its faded blue bow. Lila's eyes widened. "He likes him," she whispered, surprise and delight mingling in her voice. Maggie nodded, "Sometimes friends come in pairs." For a while, nobody spoke. Lila reached out a tentative hand. Cooper watched, wary but curious, and after a moment, he shuffled forward, his head low, placing his nose in her open palm. The touch was feather-light, but it electrified the room. Grace let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, and even Maggie blinked back sudden tears. Sam gave Cooper a look of pride, the kind of look you'd give a child taking their first steps. For the next half hour, Lila and Cooper sat together in silence broken only by soft giggles as Cooper licked the tips of her fingers, or by Lila's gentle whisperings to Mr. Buttons, telling him all about her new friend. Grace relaxed visibly, leaning back in her chair and allowing herself to watch her daughter laugh for the first time in months. Maggie excused herself to check on other patients, leaving Sam to sit near Grace. They talked in low voices about pets, about parenting, about the ache of trying to fix things that couldn't always be fixed. Sam, describing his late wife's gentleness with animals, found his own sadness softened by Grace's quiet listening. He noticed, too, the delicate way she tucked Lila's hair behind her ear, her patience even in small moments. In the waiting room, Toby, his sandy hair tousled, wearing a hoodie and battered sneakers, watched the clock, occasionally peeking down the hallway. He was awkward around visitors, more comfortable with animals than people, but he liked seeing good things happen. Ashley Grant stopped by briefly to drop off extra towels, her manner still guarded but more relaxed than before. She grinned at Toby, asking after Cooper and, when told about the special visit, gave a quick thumbs up before leaving for her shift at the bookstore downtown. As the visit ended, Lila hesitated before leaving Cooper's side, hugging Mr. Buttons and whispering goodbye. Cooper licked her hand once more, then rested his head back on the blanket, eyes following her as she left. Grace thanked Maggie and Sam, her gratitude evident in her quiet voice and the tears she quickly wiped away. "This means more than I can say," she told them, and Sam, moved, only nodded. Back home, Lila sketched pictures of Cooper and Mr. Buttons playing in a field, her crayons leaving joyful streaks of green and gold. Grace watched her daughter, hope blooming anew. At the clinic, Cooper seemed calmer, sleeping deeply for the first time since he'd arrived. Maggie updated Sam by phone, "He's got a spark again. You can see it." Sam replied, "So does Lila." Neither said what they were both beginning to believe, that the healing had already begun, for everyone. The following weekend dawned bright and cool, Spokane streets humming quietly as sunlight painted new shadows on the riverside. In Sam Whitaker's kitchen, the old man whistled softly while preparing breakfast, scrambled eggs for himself, and a special portion of plain chicken for Cooper, who now sat patiently at his feet, brown eyes alert, tail thumping. The dog's coat had grown glossier, the lines of his ribs fading beneath new strength. Sam, once reserved even in his own home, found himself talking to Cooper about everything: weather, his favorite rivers, memories of firehouse pranks. There was laughter in the house again, warm and unfamiliar. Grace Monroe, that same Saturday, was reading the local newspaper over coffee. Her figure, slender but not frail, moved quietly about her small kitchen in a pale blue sweater, her hands steady as she wrote a grocery list for the week. She glanced out the window to where Lila was twirling in the courtyard, her brown curls bouncing, Mr. Buttons tucked safely in her backpack. Today was special. Grace and Lila had been invited to join Sam and Cooper for a walk in Riverfront Park, and Lila had insisted on wearing her lucky sneakers for the adventure. Grace's heart fluttered with nervous optimism, wondering if this could be the beginning of something more than just a friendship for her daughter. Riverfront Park that morning was alive with energy, joggers in neon shorts weaving around strollers, old men tossing breadcrumbs to ducks, toddlers shrieking near the playground's painted dinosaur. Sam, in a canvas jacket and faded ball cap, greeted Grace and Lila with an easy smile. Cooper, on a blue harness, wagged his tail furiously as Lila approached. The sun caught the flecks of gold in his sable fur. "You ready for a real adventure, partner?" Sam asked, ruffling Lila's hair. Lila nodded shyly, her eyes never leaving Cooper. Grace and Sam exchanged a brief, knowing look, the kind parents use when words are not enough. They set out along the paved path, the group falling into an easy rhythm. Lila chattered softly to Cooper, telling him about her school library and the story she was writing, an epic quest featuring a brave puppy and a magical bear. Cooper listened with the attentive stillness that only dogs possess, sometimes nudging her hand with his nose. Grace and Sam followed a few steps behind, talking about gardening, city events, and the small challenges of starting over. After an hour, they stopped at a clearing near the riverbank for a picnic. Grace spread out a blanket, and Sam unpacked sandwiches and juice boxes. The grass was lush, speckled with wildflowers, and the river rushed nearby, its voice deeper and quicker than before, swollen from mountain rains. Lila tossed a stick, and Cooper, who had never quite understood fetch, sniffed it before lying down at her feet, content just to be near. It was Lila who suggested they explore the rocky trail that snaked closer to the water, eager to find treasure stones for her collection. Sam agreed, leading the way, his stride careful but steady, while Cooper trotted between the two families. Grace hung back, her phone ready for photos. The path grew narrower, rocks slick with moss, and the river's song grew louder. Suddenly, Lila, lost in conversation with Cooper, slipped on a patch of damp stone. She tumbled down the embankment, landing with a splash in the shallow, icy edge of the river. Panic seized Grace. She ran forward, calling Lila's name. Sam's old reflexes kicked in, he scanned the slope and dropped to one knee to call Cooper. But the dog had already seen it all. Cooper froze at the edge for a heartbeat, every muscle tensed. His ears flattened, his body shook. Water had been his greatest fear, the memory of the crate, the struggle for breath, but as Lila's frightened cry pierced the air, something changed. Cooper bounded forward, claws scrabbling over slick rocks, and leapt into the water. The current was mild, but for a child and a dog with trauma, it was a battlefield. Cooper paddled clumsily, driven by something deeper than training. Lila tried to stand, but her sneakers slipped. Cooper reached her, barking once, sharp and urgent. Lila threw her arms around the dog's neck, holding tight. Cooper dug in, dragging her inch by inch up the embankment, refusing to let go despite the trembling in his legs. Sam hurried to meet them, pulling Lila the final few feet onto solid ground. Grace fell to her knees, gathering her daughter and Cooper in a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. "You saved her," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. Cooper, soaked and shivering, pressed himself against Lila and licked her cheek. Lila, startled at first, broke into laughter, a high, bright sound that melted the fear in everyone. Other park-goers watched from a distance. One woman, Mrs. Green, a retired school counselor with silver hair and a floral scarf, came over to offer help. She handed Grace a dry towel from her bag, her hands gentle, voice calm. "You've got a brave one there," she said, nodding at Cooper. "And a lucky girl." Mrs. Green had spent her career comforting frightened children. She recognized courage in many forms, especially today. They sat together on the blanket, Lila wrapped in a towel, Cooper curled at her feet, water dripping from his coat. Grace thanked Sam quietly for his quick thinking. Sam shrugged, eyes moist. "He did the hard part," he said, scratching Cooper's ears. For the rest of the afternoon, the group lingered at the park, eating the last of the sandwiches, telling stories, and basking in the glow of relief and something like hope. As the sun dipped lower, they walked back to the parking lot. Cooper strode beside Lila, tail high, and did not flinch when his paws touched the remaining puddles. Grace took Sam's hand for a moment, a brief, steady pressure, before letting go, but in that instant, the connection was clear, something had shifted for all of them. That night, in her journal, Lila wrote a new ending for her story. The brave puppy was no longer afraid of water, and the magical bear had learned to laugh again. In Sam's house, Cooper curled up at the foot of the bed, eyes closing as he dreamed, not of rivers or cages, but of sunlit grass and the laughter of a little girl. Grace sat at her kitchen table, staring at the silver locket, and for the first time in years, whispered a prayer of gratitude for second chances. In the days after the river rescue, word spread quickly through Spokane about the brave German shepherd who had pulled a young girl from the icy water. The local newspaper ran a small article, "Dog Saves Child in Riverside Park," complete with a grainy photo snapped by Mrs. Green, her silver hair shining in the background as she waved at the reporter. The article was tacked to the bulletin board at the Greenleaf Animal Clinic, and every visitor stopped to read it, some even leaving treats or notes of thanks for Cooper. To most, he was just a dog, but to those who knew him, Cooper had become something more, a symbol of quiet resilience. Sam took Cooper for long, slow walks through the neighborhood, pausing so neighbors could greet the now famous dog. Children stopped to pet him, their faces bright with awe. Cooper, tail wagging, accepted every pat with calm dignity, though his eyes still searched for Lila and Grace when they were out of sight. The dog's coat had lost its dullness, his stride was steady, and even his old nightmares seemed to fade in the face of so much warmth and praise. One bright morning, the clinic's phone rang. Maggie Tran, hair swept back, glasses perched at the end of her nose, answered with her usual briskness. On the other end was Ellen Brooks, the coordinator for Heartstrong Kids, a nonprofit that paired animals with children recovering from trauma. Ellen was a woman in her mid-40s, tall and athletic, her red hair usually tied back in a tight ponytail. Her voice was confident, carrying the kind of energy that moved projects forward. "I read about Cooper," she said. "We're always looking for therapy animals, especially those who understand what it means to fight their way back. Would you and his family be interested in a visit to our center?" Maggie relayed the invitation to Sam, who, after a long phone call with Grace, agreed it might be good for everyone, Cooper, Lila, even themselves. The following Saturday, the little group drove across town to the Heartstrong Center. The building was a cheerful renovated school, painted with bright murals, rainbows, forests, dogs and cats in superhero capes. Inside, sunlight streamed onto polished floors. Ellen met them at the entrance, tall and smiling, her green sweater setting off her fiery hair. She crouched to greet Cooper first, her hand steady and voice gentle. "Hey there, hero. Ready to meet some friends?" She led them through rooms filled with beanbags and books, therapy toys and art projects. In one sunny corner, a group of children sat in a circle, painting. A sandy-haired boy named Noah, perhaps 9, with a shy smile and a faded Spider-Man t-shirt, was working on a picture of a bridge. His eyes widened as Cooper entered. "Is that the dog from the newspaper?" he whispered to Ellen, who nodded. Noah, like many at Heartstrong, carried invisible wounds. His father was away on deployment, and he'd had trouble sleeping for months. Ellen introduced the group, her voice a warm current guiding shy children and nervous parents alike. She made a point to greet Grace and Lila by name, inviting Lila to join the circle if she wished. At first, Lila hesitated, standing close to her mother, clutching Mr. Buttons, but then Cooper ambled to her side and sat, pressing his head against her knee. Lila smiled, her shoulders relaxing, and she joined the other children. Soon she was painting next to Noah, telling him in a whisper about Cooper's favorite treats. Sam watched from the doorway, a lump in his throat. He'd spent much of his life as the one doing the saving. Now, watching Lila find her voice, he felt himself letting go of something heavy. Ellen asked if Cooper would be comfortable greeting the children, and with Sam's nod, she led the dog around the circle. Some kids stroked his fur, others simply watched, but everyone smiled. Ellen explained that Heartstrong was starting a new program for therapy dogs and asked if Sam and Grace would consider letting Cooper visit regularly. Grace, always cautious, asked about the training and the support provided. Ellen's answer was thorough and reassuring. She described the animal trainers, the support groups for families, and the flexibility in scheduling. "We want it to be good for everyone," Ellen promised. Later, while the kids played outside, Sam and Grace sat on a bench beneath a blossoming dogwood tree, Ellen beside them. Sam, in his favorite wool sweater and well-worn jeans, admitted how much Cooper had changed his life since Ellen's passing. "He's made the house feel like home again," he said, his voice thick with feeling. Grace, fingers laced tightly, talked about her struggle to help Lila heal, her fear of letting new people in. Ellen, having heard similar stories for years, nodded with empathy. "It's always scary," she said. "But healing is never a straight line." As the afternoon waned, Ellen gave Lila a Heartstrong Hero badge for Cooper, a small medal on a blue ribbon. Lila hung it proudly on his collar, beaming as the other kids cheered. On the ride home, Lila asked if Cooper could come to her class at school to meet her friends. Grace smiled in the rearview mirror. "Maybe soon. He's got a new job now." That evening, Sam and Cooper sat together on the porch as twilight settled in, the sounds of the city softening into quiet. Cooper rested his head on Sam's knee, eyes half closed, utterly at peace. Sam stroked his fur, whispering, "You're more than just a survivor, boy. You're teaching us all how to live again." Across town, Grace tucked Lila into bed. Lila hugged Mr. Buttons tight and asked, "Mom, are we heroes too?" Grace kissed her forehead. "In our own ways, honey. We're all finding our courage." At the Heartstrong Center, Ellen Brooks hung a new photo on the wall, Lila and Cooper sitting side by side, both smiling, the afternoon sunlight painting them in gold. Autumn arrived in Spokane on a gust of wind, the riverbanks ablaze with gold and crimson, the air rich with the scent of fallen leaves. On Saturday morning, Sam Whitaker stood in his backyard, raking a small mountain of maple leaves into a pile beneath the old swing. Cooper, his fur sleek and shining, bounded through the heap, sending leaves flying and earning a laugh from Sam. It was the first time in years that Sam's laughter filled the air without any shadow behind it. Cooper was taller now, stronger, but his gentleness remained. He paused between games to rest his head against Sam's leg or watch the gate for Lila and Grace to arrive. Lila Monroe wore her favorite corduroy overalls and an orange scarf her mother had knitted for her birthday. She was taller than when Cooper first met her, and her brown curls had grown longer, framing her face with a wildness that matched her bright eyes. She carried Mr. Buttons by one paw, but today she didn't cling to the bear for comfort. He had become more of a sidekick than a shield. Grace, by her side, wore a dark blue wool coat, her posture confident and her smile now reaching her eyes. She had come through the past year softer but more present, often catching herself humming old songs as she packed lunches or walked to work. Today was a celebration. Lila had just won a school writing contest for her essay, Second Chances, inspired by Cooper's journey from river survivor to local hero. The story was read over the intercom, and her classmates had given her a standing ovation. Grace had brought a homemade chocolate cake, and Mrs. Parker, their neighbor, arrived with a tray of gingerbread cookies. Mrs. Parker wore a new knitted hat, lime green, a bit lopsided, with a feather stuck in the brim, her blue eyes bright with mischief. She was joined by Mr. Singh, the apartment handyman, who was stout and mustachioed, quick with a pun and always happy to lend a hand for any home repair. He brought balloons and a warm, booming laugh. Sam's house, once quiet and lonely, buzzed with voices and the scent of baking and autumn air. Maggie Tran stopped by on her lunch break, still in her white coat and bright red sneakers, her dark hair in a long braid. She brought a new collar for Cooper, navy blue with silver stars, and a letter of thanks from the Greenleaf Animal Clinic staff. Ashley Grant, now back on the soccer team and brimming with energy, dropped in with a group of friends, each taking a turn to pet Cooper and pose for pictures. Ashley's laughter was infectious, her cheeks flushed from the run over. Even Frank Ramirez, the cheerful mechanic from the river cleanup, arrived, a little late but with a bouquet of sunflowers and a joke about Cooper's movie star status. The backyard became the scene of a picnic, blankets spread on the lawn, plates balanced on knees, cider steaming in mugs. Lila led a scavenger hunt for the younger children, her voice ringing out as she read clues. Cooper acted as honorary referee, never letting the smallest kids wander too far. In the shade, Sam and Grace sat together on the porch steps. Sam wore his old gray cardigan, patched at the elbows, but looked younger than ever. Grace reached over and squeezed his hand, their fingers entwined. Both knew the gift Cooper had given them was bigger than courage, it was the chance to hope again. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Ellen Brooks from Heartstrong Kids arrived, her red hair tucked under a beret, and a stack of certificates in her arms. She gathered the group for a small ceremony. Today, we celebrate Cooper not just as a survivor or a hero, but as a guardian, someone who helps us find our way home, Ellen announced, her voice carrying over the crowd. She presented Cooper with an official, Community Therapy Dog badge, which Lila clipped to his collar with proud, trembling fingers. Then it was Lila's turn. Ellen handed her a certificate for bravery and healing, and Lila, cheeks pink, read a short thank you, her voice strong. Sometimes a second chance is all we need. Cooper taught me that being brave isn't about never being scared, it's about loving enough to try again. The applause was genuine and long, mingling with the soft bark Cooper gave in response. After the ceremony, Mrs. Parker gathered everyone for a group photo. Cooper sat front and center, Lila on one side, Sam and Grace on the other, their faces shining with happiness. In the background, the autumn leaves framed them in a blaze of color, the perfect symbol of change and new beginnings. Evening settled gently over the neighborhood. As guests drifted home, Sam, Grace, and Lila cleared plates and mugs, laughter echoing through the kitchen. Later, the three sat by the fireplace, Sam in his favorite chair, Grace curled up on the sofa, Lila lying on the rug with Cooper's head in her lap. Mr. Buttons watched from his perch on a nearby pillow, no longer needed as armor. Sam gazed around the room, at these people, this family, that Cooper had brought together. He raised his mug in a quiet toast. To second chances, and to the dog who brought us home, he said. Grace and Lila echoed him, their voices soft and full. Cooper thumped his tail, content in the warmth and love that now defined his world. Outside, the first stars blinked above Spokane, and the old house glowed with golden light. Cooper drifted into sleep, surrounded by laughter and the gentle murmur of voices, at peace at last, not just a survivor, but truly, gloriously, home. Sometimes, miracles do not come with thunder or fanfare, they arrive quietly, on four muddy paws, or in the laughter of a child who has finally found a friend. In the story of Cooper and his new family, we are reminded that God's grace can work through the most unlikely of beginnings. Even when we are lost, afraid, or left behind, a new chapter may be waiting just around the corner, written in the kindness of strangers and the courage to love again. In our daily lives, we may not always see the miracles unfolding. But every act of compassion, every moment of forgiveness, and every second chance is a spark of God's love at work. Just like Cooper, we can choose hope over fear, and faith over doubt. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment below and tell us how you have witnessed a quiet miracle in your own life. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, hope, and healing, and may God bless you and your loved ones with new beginnings every day. If you believe in the power of second chances and God's grace, type Amen in the comments. Your words might be the blessing someone else is waiting to hear.